My name is Anne Zwink, and I'm the winemaker at Soldier Creek Winery. Food science is the coolest subject. It really is. It's so applicable to your everyday life. It's chemistry, it's physics, it's biology. My food science is sensory based, so perception, so there's also psychology in there. It's the coolest thing. I'm interested in food science because we knew we were gonna start a winery. We started as corn and soybean farmers, and we also had hogs. And after a fire, my dad decided to get out of the hog business. And he and my brother wanted to plant grapes. They're agriculturists at heart. They love crops, they love being outside. Grapes are an extra bit of diversification from our regular corn and soybeans that we're used to seeing every day, everywhere you go. Don't get me wrong, corn and soybeans are beautiful. Grapes are unique. I love how it's different every single day. I never have multiple days in a row of the exact same thing. It's one day I'm going to be filtering, and one day I'm going to test for bacteria, and one day I'm going to smell and do a whole bunch of bench trials. It's different every single day. Some days I'm even out in the vineyard. I get to have some outdoor time, and some days there's planning, some days there's data and logistics, and there's so much. I never get bored because there's something interesting every single day. For winemaking, food science is about fermentation. It starts with chemistry. We start with grapes and make sure that they have a similar, a correct acid level and a correct sweetness level out in the vineyard. When we harvest, then we need to process the grapes. There's a lot of physics involved with that. So actual physical crunching of the grapes can cause some bitterness, for instance. So we need to make sure that we're using the processes that are the most gentle on the grapes to reduce bitterness perception. Once we actually have juice, then we need to add yeast. So we need to know biology. We need to make sure that the yeast are completing fermentation. So that's, just converting sugar into alcohol. And it's as simple as that, but there's so many different kinds of yeast, and each one has their strengths and each one has their weaknesses. And we need to know that, and we need to know which yeasts are good at which jobs so that we can pick the right yeast for the correct situation. Beyond that, we also have certain bacteria that we need to add. So we need to know biologically which bacteria are we going to add for the exact same reasons as the yeast. Then once all the fermentation is done, we need to know chemically what's in the matrix of the wine so that we can make sure that the wine doesn't go bad on us. Throughout the rest of the year, we need to filter the wine, we need to age the wine. We need to test in the lab how much alcohol is in the wine to make sure our labeling is correct. We need to determine how much sulfite is in the wine, and that acts as an antioxidant and a sort of preservative. That's what helps us age our wine more than a couple of years. We need to test and see how our bacteria are working. So the bacteria that we add to a wine, we need to make sure that they're continuing their process. It takes a long time for them to finish their process, so we just need to make sure that it's still going. We need to test for acid in the wine. We need to test for sugar content in the juice. So all of those processes I can do in our lab here. Then there's a couple of other processes that I can't do, and I'll send samples out to Iowa State or to commercial laboratories that can help me out. We're doing physics every day. Wine is basically like plumbing. It's kind of funny, but I never thought I would be interested in plumbing, but we're constantly thinking about how to move wine through tubes. So we need to think about our pumps, and then we need to think about our filters and what's going to clog those filters and what's going to make it so that it's pumping really too slow or what's too fast, So, and we need to be able to manually hook up the hoses to the tank, and we need to just know all of that information. I mentioned I'm involved with wine sensory, and that's the human perception of wine. So how do you perceive it? It's completely different depending on who you talk to. And it's based on our history and our experiences, our personal experiences. So that's a whole other aspect of food science that is just fascinating. During the harvest season, all of our grapes are coming in, and there's so many different varieties of grapes. We have 10 acres of grapes on our farm here. In those 10 acres of grapes, we have 10 different varieties, and each one is completely different. They have completely different aromas, completely different ripening qualities, and their own personalities. The grapes are ripe, we need to harvest, we need to process, we need to begin fermentation. So that's a 6-week period. We start at 7 a.m. processing grapes. The grapes are mechanically harvested from our vineyards just around here, and also 35 other vineyards around the state. That's an all hands on deck kind of day. We have 7 or 8 people working with us, mostly family members, and we also have some outside help too that work with us full time. And we're going to separate out non-grape material, so maybe staples or sticks or leaves. We're going to separate all of that out. Then we're going to crush the grapes and collect the juice. Then we're going to sieve the grapes, put the juice into its own specific tank, and we don't need the skins anymore. And then we're going to start fermentation on that juice. Also during that time, we need one person to test the chemistry of the juice coming in. How much sugar does it have? How much acid does it have? Does it have enough nutrient for the yeast that we're going to add? In the middle of harvest and after harvest, then we're testing the resulting wine after fermentation. How much alcohol is in the wine? How much acid is left over? Is there any sugar left over? What does it smell like? That's the most important part. What does it smell like? And based on what it smells like, what do I need to do to make sure that it's semi-consistent with the product that we've had in the past? It's really difficult to be consistent. It's different every single year, depending on the weather, depending on our new processes that we're utilizing, depending on when the grapes were harvested in the year. It's completely different every single year, no matter how much we try and make it consistent. I wouldn't say that everything that I learned in school is exactly applicable to wine, but it showed me how complex food is. There's so much complexity to food that we need to constantly be thinking about. If you want to be a food scientist, absolutely follow that passion. There's so many different aspects to food science, which is another thing that I love about food science. You don't have to be stuck in one type of career when you're in food science. You know, maybe for a couple of years you're doing research and development, or maybe a couple of years you're doing quality control, or a couple of years you're running your own small business. That's the coolest thing about food science. It's useful in so many different ways, and you will never be cornered into one job.